Now, the one thing that we do have to consider, of course, after the show season, whenever that might be, and the same will apply whether it's sort of just now coming to the end of June or whether it's in a month or two, is what really you're going to do with your existing plants that you've used for show. Well, you've got a number of options really. I mean, with zonal types you can obviously cut them back and use the cut-offs as cutting material. It's not quite so easy to do with that with some of the Regals and Angels and scented leaf varieties, primarily because they tend to split their stems, and all they want to do in the sort of early part of summer in particular is flower. So it's a bit more difficult to find shoots for cutting material on those. So often what you probably need to do is cut them back now, wait for them to grow back in the latter part of the summer, and then take cutting material from those a little bit later in the season. If they're plants that are a bit younger, that's say less than 2 years, you've got to decide whether you're going to go with them for another year. And as I've said, certainly as far as pink capitatum goes, this is a plant that I know will do very well in its 3rd or even its 4th year, being retained in a 6-inch pot. So that's one that I know I can cut back, and I know will come back even tighter and stronger next year, which will then be its 3rd year. The Angels are exactly the same. They will give you usually a better plant when they're more mature, purely because you can get a lot more tighter breaks from the base after a good number of years. Now, Angels, like a good number of them, often the cutting back is done in 2 stages. What you can do is cut them back relatively hard, losing about 1/2 to 2/3 of the growth, and then make sure that all of the branches below it are beginning to break before cutting it down even harder in the later season, probably in the sort of September time, because sometimes you just need to check that you're going to get breaks from further down, because particularly if you've got slightly harder wood, that may be a problem for it. So you want to make sure that you're going to get breaks from as far down as possible. Now, this plant is a relatively young plant. This is a sort of autumn 2013 cutting, so it's less than 2 years old. And with pink capitatum, I find that you can actually get a much better plant from it with a good number of years under its belt. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut this right back, and then I'll probably later in the season look to get a bit of cutting material from it, but it'll also rejuvenate it from the base and develop a bit of harder wood in the middle of it, and I'm hopeful that I can get a tighter plant from it next show season next year. And I'll fast forward through this to show you the actual process going on. Okay, so there we are. I've got to the end of that now. I've cut that back by about 2/3. But in the autumn, that will begin to break now, and that'll grow quite quickly. But what I will do in about September time, I will cut that back to probably even smaller than that, once I can see that there's a lot of breaks, etc. going on deep in the bowels of the plant. Once I'm sure, as I've said, it's almost like a 2-stage process, and that'll be ready to come back even tighter next year. As I say, if you want to enjoy them, please do carry on and keep them, and then you can just go for a bit of a cutback if you want to preserve the plant much later in the season. But with the zonals, you can use that material for cuttings. Everything I've cut off of that pink capitatum is not really suitable for cuttings. I'll get some good fresh growth coming out of that now, which I use for cuttings just in a couple of months' time. Right, now a couple of things to note, of course, in the cutback program that you're going to undertake. Make sure they're on the dry side before you do it. I think I've said this in the past when cutting back or stopping plants. That's always something to remember. Before doing any of your cutting back, make sure your plants are on the dry side, otherwise it does invite fungal disease into those cut ends, particularly if you've got a wet root ball, so just remember that one. Okay, that's about it for this, this video blog. Next time I think I'll begin to start looking at zonal cuttings. We're talking about plants that we're cutting back. So we'll have a look at zonal cuttings that are easy to take at this time of year, and probably the best time to take it for many of you. I'll also look at some plants that I earmarked for show originally, but a month or two ago made the decision because they were perhaps overgrown. Some of the angels in particular are a bit overgrown, a bit lollopy. So I cut them back relatively hard then, and we'll have a look at this two-stage cutback process, whereby now some of them have begun to grow back and I can see where they've broken at the base. So I'll cut them back even harder, and we'll have a look at that in the next video. So I look forward to seeing you then. Bye for now.